So XConnect is a market leader in providing information about telephone numbers. We have provided number information to the global telecoms industry as well as enterprises in the finance and e-commerce sectors for 14 years. As XConnect is focused on number portability, we get a lot of questions from the business messaging industry surrounding number portability. We will take a few minutes to answer. We have with us today XConnect's Business Development Director and Data Protection Officer, Lee Suker, and Andy Cooper, XConnect Head of Technical Solutions. So Andy, what is number portability and why is it important for A2P business messaging?
So at its most basic, number portability is the ability to move your number between networks. So you keep your number when you change providers. So number portability, mobile number portability for messaging is really about the ability to know that that number has moved between networks. Over time, you found that many countries now implement number portability. I think we're up to about 100 and something countries that now have implemented number portability. And the number of people who keep their number is increasing. So we have certain countries that have up to 50% of numbers that have been ported. So in order to route a message correctly, you should first need to know what network that telephone number belongs to. The reason for needing to know that is really about how do I deliver a message the most efficient way. So it's either saving costs or it's guaranteeing quality or it's making sure the message is delivered more often than it's not.
So I would just add one thing to that, in that for some segments of the market, porting every year is a way of life. They always port consistently. For others, whether it's older age groups, they don't. But many segments do port every year consistently.
Okay, great, thank you. So Lee, do you want to take this next question? Many companies today rely on HLR lookups to address MNP. Should they consider using MNP?
So obviously HLR lookup, it's the home location register. It's the part of the mobile network that tells you if they serve a telephone number or not. So it seems the right thing to do. The challenge is that with operators putting blocking and filtering in front of their HLRs, you don't get reliable results. You don't get low latency, and often your capacity is very limited. MNP, on the other hand, is considered to be, a database sourced from the regulator, so it's updated daily. And some service providers are able to combine the two things. So MNP gives you super fast, whereas HLR always gives you live. And there are a few instances where using a HLR lookup is the only way. For example, unboxing a new phones. But most of the time, MNP is the fast, reliable way to get number portability information.
Okay, so what are the benefits of using MNP and what are the consequences of not using it?
So, in short, reducing the number of hops that your messages take and terminating directly to the terminating operator saves you money. But to get those contracts with operators, you need enough traffic. In those circumstances, if you misroute, you're often charged an off-net penalty. The size of that penalty is crucial to the business case of using a number portability lookups service. Secondly, if you have that high message volume such that you can strike a deal with the operator, you don't want the message throughput to be delayed by using a HLR lookup. Instead, use an MNP, fast, reliable, ultra low latency.
Oh, okay. So Andy, what are the countries that make the most sense to use MNP?
So MNP in this sense, as Lee's explained, really is talking about using a query against the number portability database of the country to determine which network operator currently serves the number. So when you're looking and saying, do I need to use MNP for a given country? The first consideration you need to say is there even number portability in that country? So I think, as I said, something like 100 and something countries have number portability today. That still leaves 100 and something countries which don't. So generally you would need to use a correction, although sometimes you do want to use the number range data of that country to do your routing, which is a service that some people also provide. I think secondly, you really need to look at the economics of termination, of SMS termination in that given country. So certain countries offer a flat rate irrelevant of which network a number belongs to. And if that's true, then there is no need to know which network a number belongs to and no need to do MNP. Many countries, though, have different termination rates between the networks and also have transit rates between networks where you hand a message to the wrong network and they forward it. So in those circumstances, it can make sense economically to use MNP before you hand the message off to the termination network. And some extreme cases in the world, unless you hand the message off to the correct network, it may not even get terminated at all. They may just reject it completely. Finally, we just mention that when we speak MNP, we're speaking database, and there are certain countries in the world that do not have a database. The UK being a prime example. And so in those countries, if you want to do number portability correction, you have no choice but to use an HLR-based service.
Just one more thing there, and that is in some markets, it can be difficult to get reliable delivery receipts. And if you don't terminate to the terminating carrier directly, you may not get those delivery receipts at all, which can undermine your message termination quality and the service that you offer your customers.
Okay, so Lee, how has the use of MNP evolved over time?
So I think, number portability correction is used significantly by the A2P messaging industry and has done for some time. Increasingly, to save money, but also improve quality, and that's going to carry on. But there are new markets that are starting to use number portability correction, particularly bill to carrier. So if a consumer wants to pay a bill with their mobile phone, then that enterprise needs to direct the payment API to the correct operator. Similarly, there are new services for the finance and e-commerce sectors called KYC, Know Your Customer, or Account Takeover Protection. These are APIs provided by the operators, and you need to call the correct operator's API. So that's driving a use case for more number portability information into the finance sector and into e-commerce. But more often than not, the A2P messaging companies also have to provide these sorts of ATP KYC services to their enterprise customer. We would also like to see some data about MVNOs, not just MNOs, but sadly that data's yet to materialize on the market.
Oh, great. So Andy, what are the key features of XConnect's MNP?
So XConnect have been operating our number portability query service for the past 5 years. And we currently handle billions of queries a year for that service. So I guess the key features really for that service are kind of global coverage. So as Lee spoke earlier, you can't cover the globe by only doing MNP because there are certain countries where you cannot get access to the database and certain countries where the database doesn't exist. So XConnect builds a global coverage from MNP being the preferred method, and where we can't get MNP, we will use HLR sources, and we will normalize all of that data into a single easy to use interface. Secondly, the service is carrier class. So it's a bit of a overstated term, carrier class, but when we talk about it, what we really mean is that you get a low latency. So the query is very, very fast and you get very, very fast response time. There's very, very high availability. There's a very high capacity in terms of throughput of messages queried per second. And we have multiple points of presence to provide geographic redundancy. In addition, XConnect provides a 24/7/365 monitoring and support service to support the customers in case something does actually go wrong. The third leg of the benefits of the XConnect service is really about how easy it is to consume for a customer. So XConnect have tried to provide a flexible product offering in terms of both technical and commercials. So for example, you can consume the product over query with enum, SIP, HTTP, SMPP. You can come to any of our European or US-based points of presence. We have a flexible commercial model. We have just about every single possible commercial model that you could ever think of. And the service is therefore fully customizable, both from a technical point of view. We can define additional message types. We can define additional information fields. We can return specific customer information, but also the commercial models that go along with the technical side. And I think the final pillar, which really underpins everything that we do here, is about trust and security. So XConnect puts a lot of time, effort, money into GDPR compliance. In terms of data protection, data privacy and security, we are ISO 27001 certified. And also we're a founding member of the MEF Trust in Enterprise Messaging initiative, which really is about cleaning up the industry and making sure that the players in the industry are reliable, trusted, secure.
So I would like to make one last point. We've talked about low latency and high availability and high capacity quite generically. I think it's important to put some real numbers on that. So if we look at HLR lookup, for example, you know, a really good one, you get a latency of maybe 350 to 500 milliseconds. But if you were to start to query that at, you know, anything above 500 queries per second, that capacity can start to dry up. You compare that against a number portability database service, you know, such as the number portability query from XConnect. If the data is on board, we're talking about latencies of sub 10 milliseconds. And we're talking about capacity of, you know, in the region of 10,000 queries per second. So there is a huge difference between a carrier class service for XConnect's number portability query service versus an ordinary HLR lookup.
Okay, great. Thank you both for your time today. And if you have any other questions, feel free to contact us directly at info@xconnect.net. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thanks.